The world now waiting to see if Iran will be able to or will respond to the U.S. airstrikes on its facilities over the weekend. The U.S. President Donald Trump confirming on Saturday night that U.S. planes had dropped bunker-buster bombs on what he says were sites where Iran was developing nuclear weapons. Iran has threatened retaliation and says that it is not developing nuclear weapons. Our government has called for peace in the region. Aaliyah Vayez is a South African international relations analyst currently based in London. Aaliyah, good morning to you. What options does Iran have here? I presume they'll keep launching missiles at Israel for a start.
Good to be on the show. Thank you, Stephen, for the opportunity. What we've seen this morning is that sirens have been resounding in northern and southern parts of Israel for around 40 minutes as Iran has struck its 21st round of a mixture of missiles and drones on as I mentioned, northern and southern parts of Israel. And I think this is really, we had the foreign minister say that the U.S. strikes on Iran have been a betrayal of diplomacy, and I think that's a clear indication that Iran is still to respond in ways that are that they've proven will hit, and significantly impact Israeli kind of soil. We've seen devastation across parts of Tel Aviv, with about a third of that capital city be severely impacted, including hospitals, residential buildings, as well as military bases. I think, Iran's response is far from over.
I mean, presumably Iran could also decide to attack the US in some way. Now, it seems unlikely that they'll be able to project power in the way the US can, so probably not an attack on the sort of US mainland. But the US does have soldiers and bases and is economically vulnerable if Iran decides to find a way to close the Straits of Hormuz, for example.
Exactly correct, Stephen. I think, from recent statements from Iranian government officials, we've seen that they have directly told the United States that all of their bases within the region are retaliatory targets. So that's definitely put the United States on high alert across their bases. But also that, we've had U.S. government officials say that the U.S., within its own borders is vulnerable, given that, terrorist attacks may occur, retaliation from Iranians in and outside of the country. I think it would be a mistake to underestimate the military capability, as well as the capacity of Iran to strike fear in the hearts and minds of average Americans, as well as to put the U.S. defense and military on alert. And I think this is greatly evidenced in Iran's continuous attack with fewer and fewer missiles over the past couple of days on Israel. But while it's been fewer and fewer missiles since its first retaliation around the 27th of June, they've definitely shown their capacity to devastate.
I mean, this is all very scary. So, I mean, Iran could do all sorts of things. It could attack a US base. Then the US could launch another attack on Iran. And then where does it end? And it never ends. And isn't that really the problem?
It's true. This is definitely turning. This has got a high likelihood of turning into a conflict of attrition, where we're seeing each country one up one another, especially Iran and Israel, given their proximity and what's happening in the region, what's happened in the region thus far. But I think with this is also what I think a lot of people are misunderstanding, is that this is fundamentally a conflict that is existential to the existence of both Iran and Israel as states. Not only state leaders within the region, but also, Iran's sovereignty has been breached. Its foreign minister has said that, again, the doors of diplomacy are closed now. It needs to avenge itself in a particular way. And until that kind of need is satisfied, we're not going to see an end to the conflict. And that's where we're starting to see Iranian parliamentary officials draft various bills of legislation, which are starting to really compromise its position in multilateral non-proliferation agreements. For example, it is just this morning an MP in Iran has tabled a bill stating that it would like the country to stop all cooperation with the IAEA, which is the kind of global watchdog for nuclear activity and adherence to non-proliferation agreements. And I think that's a really significant move, given that this entire conflict is turning the concept of proliferation on its head by stating that, well, if certain Western countries that are nuclear armed are not following, not only international legal principles related to nuclear armament and proliferation, but are also, completely disregarding principles of sovereignty and diplomacy, then it's kind of a free for all for every country. So it's Iran. It can definitely take a page out of North Korea's book and kind of go dark and develop its own nuclear armament without needing to kind of inform agencies like the IAEA.
There's so many ironies to all of this. Israel, we think, has nuclear weapons. They've never said for sure. The United States, we know, has nuclear weapons. I mean, as Iran reminded us, the only country ever to use a nuclear bomb offensively at the end of the Second World War. They're saying that Iran can't have nuclear weapons. Iran can't really say that it supports human rights or is truly democratic. Look at the way they treat women, for example. I suppose one of the key things goes to aims. So one presumes that people on various sides have gamed this out, as they say. And the US and Israel, is the aim to have regime change, to remove Ayatollah Khamenei? Is the sort of aim to make sure that Iran never gets nuclear weapons? Well, you might never be able to achieve that without complete regime change. In the case of Iran, what is the aim? Is it just to hurt Israel? Is it to produce nuclear weapons? Is it to do something else? And I suspect one of the problems we have here is because no one trusts anyone else, we don't really know what everybody's aims really are.
It's true, Stephen, and I think you've done a good job of kind of describing the confusion of the situation and its very realpolitik nature. I think, yes, the US has definitely come out and said regime change, as well as Israel have said regime change would definitely be a kind of pro from this from the conflict over the past couple of days. But I think what is quite interesting is that they've likely assumed that the domestic population in Iran would turn against the government, given that it's given its involvement in a conflict like this, which has devastated vast swaths of Iran, where it's worth reminding your audience that Iran does not have the domestic capacity to on a civilian level to shelter people and its population from bombs. There are no bomb shelters as there are in Israel. But I think we've seen the opposite, right? There were massive protests in favor of the government's response towards Israel in Iran, in Tehran. We've seen support expressed by various countries and as well as domestic countries like Yemen, China, Russia. But we've also seen domestic populations protesting in favor of Iran's kind of in support of Iran in places like Iraq that have experienced what the United States strategy for regime change. I think, in terms of, to answer your question, in terms of what Iran is kind of trying to achieve or aims to achieve, is largely to defend itself. As I mentioned, it's existential. It's fighting for its capacity to operate within that region with the respect that that any other nation under international law is expected to. For example, with its borders respected, with its sovereignty respected, where its government is not continuously called a regime by Western countries and Western media. For example, it is a legitimate government. It has a credible, elected leader. It has a functioning parliament. And I think that's a particularly interesting side to see when we're looking at public opinion around this conflict is a lot of the biases against Arab countries or Arab countries in the Middle East is starting to, be seen and starting to come out. Iran has a highly educated population. Everything, people are saying about women being uneducated or Islam being oppressive in any way. We're starting to really see that be overturned. And I think that speaks to Iran is fighting for its identity.
Aaliyah Vayez, thank you very much indeed. A South African international relations analyst based currently in London.